Welcome to the 6th episode of Our Town. In the last episode of Our Town, we talked about memories and how it's important to pass them down. Today, we are very lucky to be joined by a local family with 3 generations to talk about those memories.
Where have you guys lived?
We always lived on the farm. Up until 15 years ago, we moved into Whitewood.
But Grandpa always lived on the farm.
Yeah.
And he lived on the farm where the old skidoo shack is. Grandma started out in the little town of Merrifield. When she was 12, we moved to Alberta. And then when she was about 15, we moved back to Saskatchewan. And then after that, 2 or 3 years later, she left home. She went to Saskatoon, got an education, came back to Swift Current, then went to work in Herbert, and then came to Whitewood. And I've been here ever since. 55 years.
Where were you married? How did you meet?
We met, Grandpa and Grandma met in the
In turnip patch. Remember you were pulling turnips?
Grandpa and Grandma met in the doorway of the old hospital up here.
Yeah, but she just ignored me and walked on, and I walked on. But I had actually, I think we met in the rink, really, is where we first met.
Actually, yeah, well, we passed in that doorway. But
Yeah, we passed the doorway. I knew who she was, but I don't think she knew who I was.
I was just getting accustomed to this little community.
Yeah.
What's one of the best childhood memories you can recall?
Mine? Oh. I think one of the most fun things we used to do when I was a kid, we were still in Merrifield. We used to get on the train at Merrifield and go to visit Grandma. Mom would send us 3 older girls on the train. It cost us, I think, 15 cents a piece or something to get us on that train. We'd go the 7 miles to Fairlight. Grandma would get us off the train and we'd stay there for 2 or 3 days, and then she'd put us back on that train and send us home. And we thought we had the world by the tail going that 7 miles down the road on the train.
So do your parents for kids 3 for 45 cents for 3 days.
Yeah, but that was how many years ago that was. That 15 cents was a good chunk of change.
Probably still worth it.
Oh, that's the one thing I liked the best. I used to make things, and I made this kind of a wheelbarrow, but I had 2 wheels, and still got those wheels too. But the wheels wouldn't stay on, so I'd like to get up on top of a hill and get going real fast with, and let it go and let it fly out through the air, and the wheels fall off. That's crazy. Eh?
What experiences in your life have molded you into the person you are today?
Well, I think it's your everyday experiences molds you into a person's everyday. Every day is a different experience, and I think you become the person you are because the day is totally different experience. Every day is a new challenge.
When Grandma went to work, Grandma worked in healthcare. She worked in X-ray and she worked in the lab, and she had to deal with people. Some of them were the nicest people. Some of them were so miserable. You just had to take people the way they were and just kind of let it run off your back. And if somebody gave you heck for something that really wasn't anything to do with you, you just had to accept it. So you did. And you met some beautiful people along the way, and you met some really not so nice people along the way, but you just kept going.
Who have you worked for and what jobs did you do?
I always worked health. Well, no, I shouldn't. Before, when I was in school yet, I used to go down to the news office and work filing stuff away and getting the mail out and doing all those little odd jobs. But then once I went to work, after I was educated and went to work, my first job was at Herbert, Saskatchewan, and I stayed there for a year, and then I came to Whitewood, and I, for 45 years, worked in the lab and the X-ray.
44 years and 11 months.
And that's one of the paying jobs that Grandma ever had. She never changed jobs.
And I always farmed. I always wanted to farm from the day that I planted jelly beans when I was about 3 years old. Dust in the yard, and they never grew. You'll have to check someday on the old farm and see if those jelly beans. I did have a few other part-time jobs there over the years. I worked with a man that used to do stucco work and houses and stuff, and I helped build your school, your east part of your school, and I worked at the auction barn. Worked out the co-op lumber yard. We'd unload lumber. The lumber would come in on the boxcars on the train, and we'd have to unload the lumber board by board onto a truck then take the truck down to the lumberyard, unload it again board by board, and then stack it in a nice neat pile.
First paying job I ever had was driving tractor for Grandpa for $1 an hour. And I thought I had the world by the tail until I started talking to other people who were getting paid. And I demanded a raise to $3 an hour. But I wasn't that good at math yet. We started driving tractor young.
But he kept his own hours, and the hours were a little bit padded, I think.
Well, for $1 an hour, that's going to happen. And then in high school, I pumped gas at the Esso. And then when I went to university, I worked summers running heavy equipment, running bulldozers and scrapers. And then when I was finished school, I moved back into the old farmhouse. I stayed long enough until Grandma and Grandpa got sick and left and built their own house.
But we did get sick with us.
Well, they got sick of me.
Yeah.
So they left, moved to town, and I started working at the mine, and I've been there ever since. It'll be 16 years in 3 days.
I need you to clear one thing up. You said you came home and lived at the farm with us until we left and built our own home. That was our home we were living in.
Squatters' rights, that's the way they call it. Was the key. Was.
Mom was a town kid, so I much responsibility compared to your dad.
They raise pigeons.
Yeah, no, we did. Yeah, I didn't really have a job until I left high school, and then I worked at we call it a farmer's market, I guess, where we picked vegetables for minimal wages, picking like for 25 cents
Yeah.
a strawberry. And then went to university, and then in the summers I would work for the housing authority. And then once I started teaching, that was it.
I'm going to tell you a little story about your dad when he worked at the Esso station. To this day, whenever I run into that man, he tells me what a good worker your dad was, because Dave hated to go up that ladder to change those things on that sign. And he said, I'd wait for Aaron to come from school, and Aaron would just go up that ladder. So
That's why I wait for him to come home from school too.
The things on the shelf.
Dave,
My main job.
As a child, what were your career aspirations? Did those change as you got older? Why?
Well, I always wanted to be a farmer. Like I said, from the day I planted those jelly beans, a few other jobs. And I think if I'd have been a professional person, I would like to be a lawyer. It kind of intrigues me, but I'd probably lost every case. But
Yeah, but getting paid to argue would be up your alley.
Grandma, she changed her mind 1,000 times as she was coming through school. She wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to be a policeman. Something different. And finally, about grade 11, my mother stood me up in the kitchen and looked at me, and she said, you make up your mind, because she said, 1 more year and you're out the door. Grandma was a tough one. So then I had to start really looking close to decide what I wanted to do. And I'll give lab x-ray a run and see if I don't like it after a few years, I'll try something else. But I stayed forever.
Did my dad ever sneak out, and did he get caught?
there's
No, I think
Thinking off the sneak out, I just said I was.
just when but he wanted to leave home when he was about, I don't know, not very old, and he was going to go out and live in the barn with the pigs, but
he was
But then he
mad.
realized he couldn't have TV out there. So
Yeah.
And you know what his other aspiration was? I should have asked him what he was going to do. Well, he's going to be a fireman. Well, the grandma said to me, you'll have to move away from home and be a fireman to get paid. Oh no, he was just going to be he just lived down in the basement and watched DuckTales until there was a fire call. And then
It was a solid plan.
I think I was only about 5 or 6 then.
Still one of my career goals.
Yeah. What about your mom?
I was like Grandma Lee. I didn't really have any. And then finally, I said I had to pick something. I think, by that time I was in my second year, and I liked history, and I had a good history teacher, so I followed in his footsteps.
I had a good history teacher too.
No,
Me too.
Grandma's got a question for 2 girls. What are your aspirations? What do you want to be doing in 20 years from now?
What do you want to be when you grow up?
That?
There. And what about you? What would you like to do when you grow up?
Anybody's guess here.
Work at Disneyland.
Hey,
If I come there,
worse ideas.
will you let me in for nothing?
What?
If I come down there and you're working there, will you let me in for nothing?
No.
You know, I was going to tell you girls how different it was. Kids your age growing up out in the country compared to like when grandma grew up in town. Like out in the country, when I was your age, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water, and we really didn't have roads neither. You know, there was places where the roads are, but they were just all mud in the wintertime. And of course, people didn't have electricity, so we didn't have all the things. And pretty well everybody had a phone. There was the odd person didn't have a phone. But on the phones, there was a great big box that hung on the wall, wooden box, and there were several. Your neighbors were on the same line as you, and when your phone rang, they could listen in and see what you were talking, or you could listen to what they were talking about. You weren't supposed to do that, and of course, we never ever did that. And when you wanted to phone, and everybody had their own telephone ring, and either 4 short rings or 3 short rings or 2 long and one short, and that's that your phone to answer. If you wanted to phone somebody on your line, there's a crank on the side of the phone, and you turn the crank and bells would ring and it would ring at their place. But if you wanted to phone somebody in town or somewhere else, you'd have to phone the telephone operator, and they'd be in. There was a building still there, the building beside the hotel, that little building was the telephone office, and there was women that worked in there, and there was a big kind of a switchboard with a whole bunch of cables that had to plug in, and you would phone that, contact them. There would be a button on the side of this phone, and you push that button, you'd crank, and the person the other would answer, operator. And depending on what mood they were in that day, some days they were pleasant, some days they were kind of snappy and not so nice. But anyways, and you'd give them the number of the person you wanted to phone, and they would phone. And then the other thing you had was kind of what you'd call, I guess, the Facebook of the day. If now when you've got a message, you want a whole bunch of people to see, to tell us something about, you put it on Facebook, and all kinds of people. So what they do, what they call a general ring, and that's when whoever wanted to, the message they'd contact the operator, tell them what they wanted said, and then she would there'd be a really long ring would come on your phone, and people would pick it up and listen to the message, and it was to tell about something that was important or event that was happening or something. That was something to let everybody know. And people didn't make very few long distance phone call unless it was absolutely necessary, because it cost a lot of money. Mind you, it cost maybe $2 or so to make a long distance phone call, but that was a lot of money back then. So people would write letters more than the phone, and it would cost about 5 cents for a stamp to mail a letter.
It would have been cheaper just to send your kid on the train with the message.
Yeah.
When I was a kid yet at home, of course, Christmas cards were the thing. Everybody, even if you saw them 5 times a day, you still sent them a Christmas card. And they have the string on the wall. But like grandma, my mother, would do about 200 Christmas cards every year, but it cost 1 cent to put a stamp on. So the whole card and envelope and everything was only about 2 or 3 cents for the whole. But then the stamp to put it in the post office and mail, because you never carried them across the street, you mailed them.
So she spent like $2 every Christmas for them?
To mail them, and probably about $3 or $4 to buy all these cards.
That would have been a long
Yeah, like in those days, you could buy a whole chocolate bar for 10 cents. A little one was 5 cents, and the big ones were 10 cents.
And radios, pretty well everybody had a radio, but you didn't necessarily use it all year round. And you didn't listen all day long, because they ran on batteries, because you had no electricity. And like the little batteries, they were great big batteries like this, and they cost, I think about $8 or $10, which was a lot of money. So you get a new set of batteries when winter started, and people would listen because they had more time to. So when people were working stuff or anybody working in the house, you didn't have the radio unless it was to listen to the news or something important. So we had to save the batteries. So, and then by spring, usually the batteries are starting to get wore down. So then, it cost a lot of money to have a new set of batteries. So you had to wait until winter till you got another set. So.
Can you imagine not being on your Switch or the
iPad?
iPad?
Had to sit in the house because you couldn't carry it around. Some of them sat on desks, or some of them were there.
Maybe if we just attached the Switch or the iPad to a giant battery.
And the telephones, all you could do was carry them. All you could do was make a phone call. You couldn't take pictures or anything like that.
I think we should start that. We'll just charge the iPad in the fall,
Yeah.
and it's got to last all winter. Silence, eh?
The exhibition.
That's just the difference between then and now.
Yeah.
And even the difference between when your dad was your age. They didn't have cell phones, they didn't have iPads, and I think your dad was, okay, we got the first computer in, you were about, what, 5 or so, I think,
Yeah, somewhere's around there.
somewhere
got
around
it?
there.
That's pretty good because I was 17. So we got ours in
Well,
97.
you're from the other side of the valley.
Wait, Dad got a computer when I was 5?
Takes a little longer for technology to see
Yeah,
its way
Grandpa. And
across.
it wasn't a nice. It was the monitor and the keyboard and
Color monitor, as long as the only color you needed was gray.
yeah, wasn't colored or anything.
No.
It sat on took the three pieces took up the whole top
Yes.
of the desk basically.
The first TV we had was black and white too, and it was color TV.
Yeah.
Ah.
And before TVs and all that, people used to visit a lot more because there was a lot more people out on the farms, and they'd visit more because they they didn't have TV to watch and things like that. And even sometimes your neighbors would only be half a mile or so you just walk across the field to.
I'm just curious, how old was everyone when they got their first cell phone?
22.
Okay, we got how old were it?
Yeah.
Okay, we got our first bag phone, which I still have, but I don't use.
Early 90s.
Yeah, it was good to use. Yeah, wasn't it about the early 1990s the cell phones started coming in?
Somewhere's in there.
And of course, they had to take them along with you, plug them into the cigarette lighter, which is a distinct now on vehicles. On the
Yeah.
plug it in. First cell phone, a bag, bag phone at Christmas time. I think I didn't use. First day I took it out to me and I had it in the tractor and had it plugged into the tractor and it was sitting on the floor in front. And I'd stopped eating my lunch. And I was kind of looking down at this phone. I wonder if someday somebody's going to phone me. Some gramophone, maybe just to see how the phone works. It was such a novelty, such a change in things, eh?
Then we got the flip phone, but
Yeah.
it was the little flip piece was this narrow little piece, but the rest of it was this great big
Oh, yeah,
chunky
And of
phone.
course, you couldn't text. The first ones you couldn't text on them.
No, just phone calls.
Yeah. And my grandpa had a bag phone in the 90s, but I didn't get mine till I think I was in 2000, I think, because I was interning in PA and I for the drive.
Yeah, I didn't get my own until I left home, basically.
Yeah. And you could, it wasn't texting like it was now. It was
No.
P9.
I think you got yours about 10 minutes after, or did you have it before then?
Yeah, I think it was the year before
Yeah.
I left.
The ones never break.
Good Finnish phone doesn't break.
And of course, when I went to school, I went to a country school, the place where I got the flower pot. And of course, that was about 3 miles from home. And of course, no school buses back then. And of course, I went from grade 1. Of course, there was no kindergarten back then either. You started school about 6 years old. And I only went to grade 8. Well, then when to come to grade 8, I had to come to town. Well, the only way to get to town, and wasn't school bus run, so I had to walk up to the highway to catch the school bus. And the first school bus I rode on, it wasn't really a school bus. It was a van, not much bigger than your mom's vehicle here. And I think 17 kids riding on it. And what happened, the man that owned the school bus and drove the school bus, he'd taken seats out and he put benches around the inside. And you just kind of piled in there, and some of the time and you could just imagine the fighting and the carry on that went on in that bus. And of course, no discipline by the bus driver.
What are some special memories you have of your children or grandchildren?
Oh, I think my 2 girls here have helped me out in the shop building things. That's very, very special.
But it was Aaron, wasn't it, that made the flour out of the sprocket?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And the pickle fork, it was still up.
Odds and ends.
The ashtray he made. That was the remember the ashtray
Yeah.
that Tony wanted? He was going to mail
Yeah.
it. Wanted?
It was
He was.
Until I realized it was about 10 pounds and it'd be
Yeah.
very
It
was
expensive to send.
made out of lead or something.
Well, it's a big cast iron piece off the combine, and he made, because when he was about 10, he would be able to shop me welding and building and inventing things. Very good at inventing things, and he made this. It was supposed to be an ashtray because his auntie wanted in Calgary smoked, and he was going to make this ashtray. And it weighed about 10 or 15 around. He wanted to mail. It's still out in the shop. And the pickle fork, the nice little pickle fork he made, and sunflower out of a yellow sprocket and
A big spring, wasn't it?
and a spring.
And he put this big bright yellow sprocket on top of this red spring
And he
in
said,
the
there,
end.
he said, I made a sunflower.
So we have an imagination.
Okay, Mom, other than Grandma sending you kids on the train, What kinds of things did your family do together when you were young?
Well, once or twice a year, we maybe, well, I shouldn't know, probably maybe 3 or 4 times every summer, we would get loaded in the car and we would get taken to Canosie Lake for a day. And then, other than that, other than to go to Grandma's house, that we never traveled very much as kids. There, you had a little old car, and the very first car I remember, anyways, was us three old. We didn't have the two younger kids yet. There was mom and dad in the front seat, and then there was this. I don't even know what kind of a car it was, but this little back seat. But there's a big back window here with a big shelf, and we used to fight over who got to lay up in the back shelf. There was no such thing as a seat belt in those days, so. And I do distinctly remember we were on our way to the dentist. And at that point, the dentist that was around there was in Redvers at that. So we were being loaded up and taken to the dentist. And down a gravel road, which is all there ever was in those days, we going, and it was in the 50s, it was wet. Blew a tire on this old car, and the whole car ended up in a slough. We were all wading out of this car. Then we had to get somebody to come with a tractor to pull the car out of the slough and get the tire changed. And those were the kind of exciting things we got to do. We got to go, me and the girl right across the street. We had one old wagon between about 5 houses there, and the two of us went one summer around back roads around town and the outskirts down there. We picked up pop bottles and beer bottles and whatnot. We made $1.20 that day.
An entrepreneur.
Had to split her up between about 3 or 4 people, but we had the world by the tail because we had money. And what else did we do? We played outside all the time, and because we were always in town. So in the evening after supper, it was in the summertime. It was get outside and played kick the can or something like that all through the neighborhood. That was a tin can that sat in the middle of the street,
I
Aaron.
think we're all familiar with kick the can, Mo.
And in the wintertime, it was once the ice was in, it would go to the rink. We skated. Everybody skated. Mom and Dad curled, and there was no such thing as artificial ice. So usually about the February thaw, the first week in February, rest assured the curling ice had big soft blobs all the way down. Every time we wanted to curl them, we'd be out there with a scraper taking these lumps off. On the skating rink, we just skated over top of them.
And if I wanted to skate when I went to school, school kind of sat up on a little bit of a hill, and there was a low spot down in there. And of course, there was a well right beside the school just above, so we'd pump water and pair it with a pail and make a little patch of ice. It wouldn't be maybe not much bigger than this room here, and that's what we had to skate.
There was no such thing as figure skating lessons. There was boys played hockey, but there was no such thing as girls playing hockey when I was young. They just didn't. No.
But you played for 1 year, didn't you?
Yeah, but I was about 17 then.
What types of things did you do as a kid that the kids of the newer generation don't do anymore?
Kick the can.
Yeah.
Yeah, played out on the streets and like you played till dark or even a little bit after. Nobody ever worried about anybody then because we had, like now if we went in, you might have a book to read if you juggled books around because there was no libraries like we had this trade books around. The libraries were in the cities and that, and we'd trade books around the community and you read it and somebody else would read it, somebody else would read it, and then it'd come back and your younger sister would read it, and then books would just keep going around. And the odd one or two I can remember in school, quite rather talented in art and would spend time where I might be reading, they'd spend time drawing or something. Weed the garden all summer. It was, if you had nothing to do, you'd be weeding the
Say
garden.
that's where the turtle patch comes in. Played marbles, had 5 holes in the ground and shoot the marbles.
Uh-huh.
Still got the marbles.
Most of them.
I was going to say that there's days you miss nephew. The times are really different, and you girls, you girls have got your bikes and you've got that little electric thing. Whatever, what do you call that thing? You ride? Whatever you ride around on it, and you're riding the quads. We had one bike among 5 kids. Most of the time, it had a flat tires. Never went anywhere. Times were just different, really different.
I had one on the back wheel would seize up, so you'd have to push it home with stuff. Still got that bike too. So shit.
Wait, what shed is it in?
That's in the one the very far east. The one that's way back into the east. But there's no wheels on. It's kind of
Behind the garden.
Out by way
Oh,
out
yeah.
past Grandpa's garden.
One thing I've noticed too, even at school, like what we always did as kids and as a family, it was play cards. And kids today don't play cards. They don't know how to play cards. And that was something that we always did. We don't play much of our cards or like other games like crokinole or stuff like that. Yeah.
We had some games to play. We didn't play a lot of cards at our place. There was a few things we played with. Mom's side of the family didn't play a lot of cards.
Oh, I know my grandma didn't play cards except for solitaire, but she wouldn't play other cards. But the rest of us did.
But crokinole, we played a lot of crokinole, checkers.
Yeah. Well, you guys play checkers with grandma.
And you play cards at grandma's.
Yeah.
Old bunny.
Yeah.
Grandma usually ends up being the old bunny. Eh?
Yeah.
We've always played crib. Aaron won't play crib and won't learn.
No.
15 is too hard for him.
I find no joy in counting to 15.
I don't really know how to play crib either.
As a child, what were your everyday responsibilities?
Keep the wood box full and chickens fed.
Yeah, what did we say your responsibilities were?
Eating.
Yeah. What else?
Drinking.
Yeah. Sustaining life.
Feed the cat.
Feeding the turtle.
Yeah.
And the turtle.
Yeah. Feeding the animals.
Playing.
Playing with Merle. Yeah. Not a lot. Every once in a while, keeping your room clean, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only.
Although it's still.
We always had a cat. Very short time we had the dog. It didn't like us, and so he had to go live at a farm. But we always had a cat. But I can remember when I was little, and I can still remember the day. Grandma had long hair. Mama had never cut her hair. None of us girls had our hair. And I was sitting on a stool getting my hair brushed, and it was knotted. And I was crying and squawking and arguing with my mother. And she kept brushing and I kept screaming. And she did this once and I screamed, ouch. And the big mother cat came flying at my mother right on her back and just dug her claws in. My hair got cut that afternoon. It's the last time I ever had long hair. I was all of about 4 or 5 years old. Funny how there's something I can still see that day when that cat climbed through the air at her. The racket that went on.
What were your guys' responsibilities?
Keeping my room clean. And
Having tractor for $1 an hour.
Did you have to feed your birds?
probably. I would go out with my grandpa. We had horses, so I would go out with him and feed the horses. And I guess probably other than that, just keeping the house clean and yeah, other than that, that's probably about it.
Mowing the lawn, feeding the animals. All stuff that you should learn to do.
Because we had cows and pigs and their dad was your age and they had to be fed. And
Chickens.
chickens and chickens.
Did you have the geese?
Well, not when your dad was. We had geese before that for a little while.
Yeah, you don't want geese.
Grandpa went to an auction sale not too long after we were married, came home with 5 geese, I think it was. Grandma looked down, and what are those?
And grandma walked out across the yard and he didn't have them cooped up and the damn things chased him.
What do you remember about your childhood home? Where did you grow up? Where do you consider your hometown?
Well, I guess mine would have to be Whitewood.
Mine too.
I guess mine is Esterhazy. It's too far.
Well, I was Maryfield and then I was Pincher Creek and then I was Shornavan.
A gypsy, eh?
I was, yes. And then I went to Saskatoon, and that really was just a stopover to get an education. And then I had to spend a few months in Swift Current to be assessed for practicum. And then I went to Herbert for a year, and then I came here. Been here for 55 years. So hometown is Whitewood.
What are you most proud of in your life?
So far, I guess I would say my family.
Yeah. For 54 years, we're still together. That's
As of yesterday, 4 years, 1 day.
and then our son never ended up in jail, so
That we know of.
that we and he married a lovely woman, and they gave us 2 beautiful granddaughters, and so I think just family.
Yeah, I'd agree.
They're okay, I guess.
Rude. So, what are you most proud of in your life? I want to say my cats, but I don't.
You can say that.
I think I can say my animals.
She loves her ants.
Squirrel.
Well,
Yeah.
And his favorite.
you're his favorite, yes.
I don't know. He kind of likes me.
No, I'm the favorite. Mama.
What are the stories behind your family heirlooms?
Do we have any?
No.
I think the ashtray in the shop is a front runner right now.
What about that big like clock that you have in your office?
Well, that's one we bought at an auction. It's not really.
Not really an heirloom.
90% of what you see so is going to be from an office, and that's on both sides.
There's somebody else's heirloom.
Especially
To make the cut.
I still have my pen that I won in grade 8 for being best actor at a concert thing. So I still have that pen. So that's
And someday, girls, that pen will be yours.
You'll have to fight over it though.
Yeah.
yours.
first pen to be yours.
Well, one of you can have the pen and one of you can have grandma's china.
Well,
Me.
there's
the China.
there's the china, but there's also the set of Roger's silverware too.
I get.
One of these days we'll have to get it out and clean it.
How did you get all this China?
I've saved it and bought it.
Some that I got an auction sale for.
Yeah, like pieces of silver. He still watches all these auctions for silver.
Oh, she missed the deal there yesterday. I could have had another whole 8 sitting.
We could host like the king, but one day.
What about like that polar bear owl that you have like on the light under like the picture of like mom and dad's wedding that you have?
Not from an auction, but fairly new. Heirloom is supposed to be something that's passed down.
Some
Yes.
of that I think for
You brought that home from
somewhere
Mm.
or whatever. Or what, I think some we can't remember it.
Sitting here thinking of this, I can think back when they first moved me from the hospital, Coastview Hospital, moved me over with the piece on the nursing home. And the people that were in there, and one of them was Bernadette. And then you guys didn't know Bernadette. She died quite a few years, probably 15, 20 years ago, and she was 90 some then. So that's how old she was. And the one day we got talking, and she commented on the fact, she said, I have seen this world change from everybody traveling either on foot or on the back of a horse. Because she said, when we first started out over here, she said, my first memories, we didn't even have a wheeled wagon. We either walked or you rode on horseback. And she said, I have seen them go from that to wheels, then to motors. And she said, I've watched a man land on the moon. She said, I have probably seen bigger changes than anybody will ever see in a lifetime. Because she said, now on the next generation can already kind of foresee what's coming, the changes that are going to come. And I had to think about that for a long time, and I thought, you're right. They were out in the St. Hubert's area, and that's where her family, and she saw those changes go from everything.
Well, one thing I forgot about going to school in the country school there, the first, the engines like are on the train now. And when I first started school, it was the steam engine type, the trains, the engines would have all the smoke came out. And of course, in the wintertime, the snow in the schoolyard would be covered. So I remember the first day at school, one of these new diesel motors came by, and of course it blew its whistle, and it was of course totally different. And there, somebody said that's a diesel, and everybody jumped up out of the school. Didn't even ask the teacher to leave it, and went out to see this train. It was the first time we'd seen a diesel locomotive on a train. Of course, there was all 9 or 10 of us in the school because
Yeah.
country school grades 1 to 8, and then I think when the last year I was in school, country school, I think there was 9, and then 3 of us left, so they left about 6, and then about 3 years later they closed the school because it wasn't economic to keep a teacher. And of course, the resistance that people had to closing country schools too, because there was that perceived thing that you didn't get as good an education at a town school. And so the kids were likely to get in trouble if they went into town school. Anyways, and of course, there another thing. Maybe I should have been telling this when like when they started closing a lot of these schools, and of course they put school buses in, but they weren't in every area. Like I said, I had to walk to catch school, but they put them in, and the roads weren't prepared for that change. The roads were, when it rained, they were mud and in pass. When in the wintertime, they weren't passable at all in a lot of cases. And of course,
It really hasn't changed.
Yeah, I was
well,
gonna say,
no,
it could change before we're fully, still seems common.
yeah, the roads have improved, but they're still not. They should be, but that's it. But it's just like change now with coming to electrical vehicles. We're not, in my opinion, I don't think we're really prepared for the change. We don't have the big enough grid. We don't have enough charging.
Mhm.
It's that change that comes until they get everything integrated and changing. Because once they start putting schools, that's when they start, realize, okay, we got to start building roads.
Well, thank you for joining us today. It has been a pleasure just to hear your guys' stories and your memories. I think for this podcast episode, the word of the day should be knowledge. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.